The great theologians have said that theology is autobiography. What that means essentially is that what your story of your life is affects the way that you think about God. That's certainly been true for me, and so I want to tell you a story. When I was just a graduate from high school, I got to go off to the University of Arizona. They invited me to play water polo for them. So off I went. It was great. Part of the excitement of that freshman year of college was pledging and the rush time of fraternities. Fraternities turned out to be sort of like the caricature of that movie Animal House, but I didn't know that at the time, and it was all pretty exciting. So I joined a fraternity at the University of Arizona while I was playing water polo out there. Off we went. Well, they have a pledge class. There were about 30 of us, and there were things that we were supposed to do. We got ready for a big barnyard party, a Sadie Hawkins dance. And we had to go out and get all these bales of hay and these chickens and goats and have them all around the fraternity house, the courtyard area, and so that, it would create the ambiance and it would be lots of fun. Well, I came home from a water polo game one day, rode up to the house, and guys were jumping off the roof into the courtyard where they'd undone one of these hay bales to make a hay stack. Well, the dormitory part of the fraternity house was 3 stories, and guys were up on the top, leaping off this thing, landing on this. It was a long way to fall, but everybody's 18, 19, 20 years old. They didn't care. We didn't care. I didn't care. So they said, "Go for it, Eric." Well, I was a go for it kind of guy in my life at that time. So I went up there and jumped off the roof, just like everybody else. At least I thought I did like everybody else, and landed, flew down and landed. The only thing was, I went straight through that haystack, and the concrete was underneath and hit it pretty hard. Well, it knocked the wind out of me. At least I thought that's what it did. It took a little while to tell everybody that I was okay, but then I did. And so I got up kind of gingerly from that point on and went along to the Sadie Hawkins party, and the next day, and didn't feel any better. So I went off to the university healthcare place and talked to them. They took a couple x-rays, and well, it turned out I'd fractured a couple of vertebrae in my back. That knocked me out of water polo. Basically, it knocked me out of my plan for my life at that time. Pretty depressing. Well, I had to wear a back brace. Now, it wasn't a halo, but it was a kind that you put on it had pressure points, and pretty hard on an 18-year-old whose self-image was all about, what you looked like. And so carried on and kind of began to bomb out of school. I wasn't doing well, didn't go to classes, spent a lot of time smoking pot, getting high, just escaping. And then the fraternity house got after me because I was selling pot to some of the other brothers in there, and they didn't want me to do that. So they were thinking about tossing me out of there. And just about that time, I came home for Thanksgiving vacation. Well, here I am in Coronado, and I'm visiting with friends, and I went to go see a buddy of mine, Steve Moxley. Steve had a garage apartment, and we went up there. That was pretty cool for 18-year-olds. Went up to his apartment, and we're sitting and talking, and he's throwing a pot on a wheel, and we're talking, and we're smoking pot together, and he starts telling me about Jesus. Oh gosh, I did not want to hear about Jesus. I thought, in one ear, out the other, should be fine. So got home later that night, I'm in bed, I'm thinking about all these things, going back and forth, and can't sleep, and my life is not going very well, at least not how I planned. I'm bombing out of school. The fraternity house thinking about kicking me out. I can see that I'm on a path to nowhere good. And I've always felt like I was a pretty good guy. So I'm going back and forth about that. And then I start thinking about God and whether God really exists or not. Up to that time, I'd been raised in church, but I was pretty sure in my wise 18 years that God didn't exist until then. So I'm thinking about all this stuff, tossing and turning, going back and forth, thinking about whether God is there, thinking about other people who have decided that God is there. And I said, "Okay, God, if you're really who you say you are, take my life and do what you can with it. Well, then I went to sleep. Went to school, went back to school, and we're driving along, and I'm looking out, and gosh, I was just high on God, high on life, high on everything. Got back to the school and met up with a couple of young women who sat on either side of me in one of my classes. They used to come to water polo games, and we decided we would study at one of their houses. So Susie Brown and Becca Lee. Went to their house and sat down and talked, and I saw that Susie, whose house it was, had a cross around her neck. And I saw that cross, and I said, "Well, Susie, are you a Christian?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, me too, about 3 days ago." And well, there's more story that comes after this. But I want to back up and say, now, as I understand all of that took place for me, this really conversion experience, I knew that I was saved by God. I knew that saved me. That's how I thought about that for a long time. But then as time went on further, and I began to think about it more, I realized that there was an awakening that had taken place in my life, that I'd always been known by God. Even though I was saved at that time, I'd always been known by God, and I just became awake to God's presence in my life. And now, as I get even further down the road of life, I look back on the whole thing and I see it all as a process. From the time of birth, when I was formed within my mother's wombs, God formed me there. God has always known me. God has been with me throughout all the days of my life, whether I've been aware of it, awake to it, or not. And it's just kept on going, unfolding. All of life has been unfolding. This presence of God with me. And now I understand that whole process to be one of wakening grace.